Okay, picture this with me. It's the night before the big exam, and one student sneaks into the classroom after everyone's gone home. He finds the teacher's answer key, but he doesn't just copy the answers down. He flips right past them to something else entirely. The teacher's own solution notebook. Every step, where she pauses, where she doubts herself, how she catches her own mistakes and fixes them. Next morning, that student solves problems he has never seen before. Not by memory, by thinking exactly the way his teacher thinks. So here's my question for you. Is that studying or is that stealing? Take a second. Honestly, where do you land? Because right now, that exact question has turned into a full-blown fight between the United States and China. And I'm not exaggerating. And this time the prize isn't chips or data centers or factories. It's the answer an AI gives and how it got there. July 27th, 2026. China's Ministry of Commerce steps up to a podium and uses two words nobody in Washington expected. AI hegemonism. The ministry said Washington was threatening Chinese companies over claims they copied advanced American models, with no real factual or legal grounds. And it warned that if real harm followed, China would do whatever it takes to protect its own interests. That's diplomatic for "will retaliate." Rewind 1 week. White House Science Director Michael Kratsios said the government had information that Moonshot AI distilled one of Anthropic's Claude models. Moonshot is a Beijing startup. Its new model is called Kimi K3, released July 16th. And honestly, the benchmark scores turned a lot of heads. Then Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent added the threat. Sanctions, the entity list. The same trade blacklist Washington once used against Huawei, he put it bluntly online. America supports open source AI, he said, but open source is not open season on American IP. Moonshot pushed back hard. It told a Chinese business daily that Kimi K3's gains came from original changes to its underlying architecture. So what exactly is America accusing them of? To get it, you need one number from a report published back in February. Anthropic, the company behind Claude, said it had identified industrial-scale campaigns by 3 Chinese labs: DeepSeek, Moonshot, and Minimax. Roughly 24,000 fraudulent accounts, over 16 million exchanges with Claude. All of it, the company says, violating its terms of service. Sit with that number a second. 16 million conversations. That is not curiosity, and it's not casual research. That's a factory running shifts. And they weren't asking random questions. According to the report, the prompts targeted the most valuable skills: agentic reasoning, tool use, and coding. Moonshot alone accounted for more than 3.4 million of those exchanges. Coding, data analysis, computer vision, and computer use agents. And in a later phase, the report says, Moonshot got more surgical. It started trying to extract and reconstruct Claude's reasoning traces. Hold on to that phrase. Reasoning traces. It's going to matter more than anything else in this story. I'll come back to it. Here's how American firms frame it. We spent billions building the best teacher on earth. Then thousands of fake students walked into the room. They recorded every lecture, every worked solution, every correction. So tell me, is that a study group or is that corporate espionage? But before you make up your mind, you have to hear the other side. Because China's answer here is not just noise. Beijing's argument starts here. Distillation is a normal, widely used industry technique. Not a crime, not a trick. Just how AI training works. The ministry also argued that American firms have distilled from Chinese models for their own research and training. So who is copying whom? It pointed out that nearly 200 U.S. startups had urged their own government not to cut off access to Chinese open-source models. It made a broader claim too. America is ignoring how fast Chinese labs now ship models and how good some of them already are. And there's a sharper jab hidden underneath. American AI learned by reading the internet. Our books, our code, our questions, our arguments. So China asks, when your model learns from everyone's writing, that's progress. When our model learns from your answers, that's theft? Uncomfortable question, right? I'll be honest with you. The first time I sat with that, I didn't have a clean answer either. Okay, let's slow down and actually explain the technology. Because everything ahead of us depends on you getting this one idea. The biggest AI systems, the ones called frontier models, take enormous amounts of computing power, data, and money to train. Enormous. Distillation is the shortcut. You take a big, expensive teacher model and you use its outputs to train a small student model. The teacher generates examples, answers, explanations, working code. Those examples become the textbook that the smaller student model actually learns from. Important detail: the student is not a copy. It doesn't inherit the teacher's weights, its architecture, or its full range of abilities. It just picks up selected behaviors, enough to do certain jobs well on cheaper hardware at a small fraction of the cost. Think of it like an expensive private tutor solving problems out loud while the cheaper student takes notes. Same answers, dramatically lower bill. And this is genuinely standard practice. Stanford's Alpaca project, Microsoft's Orca research. American teams have used this technique for years, but something changed recently. Labs stopped caring only about the final answer and started caring about the steps that led there. That's chain of thought. Back in 2022, Google researchers showed something strange. Ask a big model to think step by step, and it gets smarter, not slightly smarter. On grade school math word problems, one model's solve rate more than doubled, just from writing out its intermediate steps. So now the model produces two things: the answer and the path. And it turns out the path might be the more valuable one. A machine learning researcher at ETH Zurich compared it to human learning. Solutions showing all the steps teach far more than bare final answers. Google research proved that concretely. They pulled rationales, the intermediate reasoning steps, out of a giant model and trained tiny models on them. The result was almost absurd. A 770 million parameter model outperformed one with 540 billion. Roughly 700 times smaller. So reasoning traces aren't just explanation. They're compressed skill. The difference between memorizing an answer and actually learning how to solve. But here's an honest caveat, and I want to be careful here. Is that visible reasoning really what's happening inside the model? Anthropic's own researchers tested exactly that, and found stated reasoning isn't always faithful. Sometimes it's a plausible story attached after the answer. So let's be precise. Call it a trace of problem solving, not proof of a machine's inner thoughts. That distinction is going to matter legally. Now, here's the mechanics question. How do you even collect millions of reasoning traces from a model you're not supposed to have access to? Remember, Anthropic doesn't sell Claude commercially in China, so according to its report, the workaround was proxy services reselling access at scale. It describes sprawling networks of fraudulent accounts, one proxy network allegedly running more than 20,000 of them at the same time. Ban one account, another appears. Mix the extraction traffic in with ordinary customer requests, and the pattern becomes very hard to see. In one technique described, prompts ask Claude to imagine and write out the internal reasoning behind a finished answer, step by step. Read that again. Not what's the answer, but show me how you would have thought your way there. That's the whole ballgame. Now, a single prompt like that is completely harmless. Thousands of variations of it across hundreds of coordinated accounts is something else entirely. It's not breaking into the kitchen and stealing a recipe. It's ordering the same dish a million times and reverse engineering it. And here's where the mood in the room changes completely. Because this stopped being a business dispute quite a while ago, American officials worry a distilled model doesn't inherit the safety guardrails the original was built with. The capabilities transfer. The brakes don't. Analysts have also accused China of using outputs from American models to help train systems with defense applications. Drones, targeting, surveillance. China pursues what's called military-civil fusion, deliberately blurring the line between commercial tech firms and defense research. That's not a secret. So the question stops being who owns this answer and becomes something much heavier. What happens after that capability leaves the building? That's why a copyright-shaped argument suddenly has Treasury secretaries attached to it. Still with me? Good, because now it gets philosophical. Every intellectual property fight you've ever heard of asked one question. What did you copy? Sample the song, lift the code, infringe the patent? This fight asks something different. Not what did you copy, but what did you learn? And the law has always been much shakier there. Because copyright, as WIPO explains it, protects expression. It does not protect ideas, procedures, methods of operation, or mathematical concepts themselves. So an AI's final answer might well be expression. But its way of solving? That starts to look an awful lot like a method. And methods, generally speaking, aren't things anyone gets to own outright. That's the wall this entire argument keeps running straight into. So the lawyers pivot. Maybe it's a trade secret. Information that's commercially valuable because it's secret, known to few, and actively protected. But here's the snag. Can something stay secret after you've handed it to millions of paying customers through an API? Genuinely unsettled. Then unfair competition. Then contract law. This case keeps sliding between 5 different legal boxes and never quite fits inside anyone. Which brings us to the least glamorous argument in this entire story, and quite possibly the one that actually decides it: the terms of service. OpenAI's terms prohibit automatically or programmatically extracting output, bypassing rate limits, and using output to develop a competing model. Notice what that means. You can own the output you generate and still be contractually barred from using it to train a rival. So the sharpest question in a courtroom might not be, did you infringe? It might simply be, did you break the promise you made? Unsexy? Absolutely. But contract law has ended more tech fights than copyright ever has. Sometimes the boring argument is the deadly one. Okay, deep breath. Because now we reach the part of the story that I honestly haven't been able to stop thinking about. Humans have always learned this way. Philosophers read philosophers. Scientists build on old papers. Developers get better by reading other people's code. Nobody calls that theft. We call it education. So why does it feel so different when a machine does the exact same thing? Maybe the difference isn't the learning at all. Maybe it's the scale, the speed, and how fast the lesson becomes a competing product. A student who learns your method takes years to become your rival. A model that learns it can ship as a product next quarter. So let's go back to that dark classroom. The student, the teacher's notebook. Studying or stealing? Do you have an answer yet? Because I'm not sure anyone does. Not the ministries, not the labs, not the lawyers. This is genuinely uncharted ground for everybody. But I keep coming back to this. Maybe the real property of this age isn't the answer at all. It's the way of getting there. When the process becomes property, who still gets to learn? Having heard all this, what do you think? That's a wrap for today.